Hello friends of the electrified charging fun and welcome to Speicher Elektrisiert, your channel all around the Skoda ENYAQ and Skoda's e-mobility. My name is Matthias and today we talk about the community favorites, and this is something I get asked quite often and I received a lot of emails in my inbox, and it comes from all-wheel drive ENYAQ drivers who ask me, hey Matthias, is there some way to drive in a permanent all-wheel drive mode with the ENYAQ? And by the way, if I have an all-wheel drive ENYAQ, does it also regenerate energy on the front axle when I brake? So here we go. What I'm talking about in this video applies equally to ENYAQs model year 2024, so with the new motor on the rear axle, as well as the ENYAQs before. So basically what has changed, the model year 2024 got a new engine on the rear, the APP 550, which has a maximum torque of 550 Newton meter, whilst the older ENYAQs have 310 Newton meters at a maximum on the rear axle. The front motor stays the same, no matter the model year. And one could already argue at this point, well, it's quite easy to get a permanent all-wheel drive. Matthias, what's the point? Because I just simply set the drive mode to traction. But traction has two issues. First, it is only available to ENYAQs which came ex-works with software version 3.0 or higher. Those ENYAQs who got, that was my smartphone already installed for some video, okay. But back to the software. ENYAQs who came with software version 3 got traction mode. ENYAQs who come with software version 2 and got updated to 3.0 or higher didn't have traction. They were simply not able to give this mode to the older ENYAQs. I don't know why. So basically 60 to 70,000 ENYAQs doesn't have traction mode. And the second thing with traction mode is you can only operate it up to 20 kilometers an hour and then it deactivates itself. And basically traction mode is something which tinkers with the ASR, so the anti-slip regulation, and distributes the energy evenly to all wheels. But what if you want to have permanent all-wheel drive on the highway or in the city? Well, you don't have any options to configure your all-wheel drive in the ENYAQ. And then the next question is, if I regenerate, if I brake, does the front motor also regenerates, or are there only the mechanical brakes applied to the front, or is it only on the back? And since we've got the power display displayed in our display, we can say, well, we know if power is given to the motors or is recuperated, so basically that mechanical energy is converted to electrical energy, but we cannot say from which engine. And so I thought, what can we do? And there my OBD adapter comes in quite handy. This is WeGate iCar Pro BLE 4.0. And this is important because don't buy the 3.0 or lower because they don't work with iOS with the iPhone. You need the Bluetooth version 4 on it. You find a link down in the description. It's an affiliate link, so I get a small amount of money if you buy from this link. You don't pay more. And with this adapter, I can grab information from the service port of the ENYAQ. And the information I need is the torque. So basically, if we've got no torque on an axle, well, there is no energy given to the motors, or there is no energy coming from the motors. If we have a positive torque, there is energy given to the motors, and if we've got a negative torque, then it might be that this engine is regenerating. But it could also be that this engine doesn't do anything and it's the mechanical brakes who are providing this negative torque. And to find out more about this, we do some driving tests and some analysis afterwards, because we need a couple of more values. And within the next chapter, you also get to know how to drive in permanent all-wheel drive mode. Everything starts with the drive mode selection down here. And if I press this, you see I do not have any traction mode because I have an updated ENYAQ, and so it is missing here. And then you basically can say the first three driving modes, Eco, Comfort and Normal, you will mainly drive your all-wheel drive ENYAQ with the rear motor. Normally in these three modes you do not get an all-wheel drive ENYAQ, only if the situation requires it. And everything changes when you switch over to sport, because in sport mode you get an all-wheel drive ENYAQ, and I'll show you in a second when we do the driving tests. And basically what it does, the sport mode gives a distribution of 30% of power to the front axle and 70% to the rear if you are accelerating. And if you're only driving without accelerating, you get a quite even distribution of nearly 50-50 to both axles, and this permanent. So sport mode is your friend. And basically, sport mode is also my friend if I want to find out if we have regeneration on the front axle. And another thing is I need to dive into, is it mechanical or is it really regeneration and electrical? Therefore, I already showed you the OBD adapter. And the second thing we need is an app to show the data. And the app we use, or I use, is this one here, the car scanner. And the car scanner is an app for Android and iOS. You can have a free version and also a paid version. And there you can connect with your OBD adapter, which now is plugged into the service port. And for this, I built a dashboard where I have all the necessary information I need for this video. You can see it here. And on my dashboard, I've got all those values, basically the front torque and the rear torque, the rounds per minute of the motor. And as you can see, I only have one value. I don't have two values, so I cannot separate front or rear motor. Then I grab my speed, I grab the DC battery power, and I have the state of charge and the battery temperature. Basically, I don't need state of charge and battery temperature for my test. But think about it. Regenerating energy with your motors is nothing else than a fast DC charging with high powers possible, and so it is dependent on the state of charge and the temperature of your battery in the ENYAQ. The higher the temperature and the lower the state of charge, the better the regeneration. So if you are trying to regenerate with 90% state of charge in a 1 degree cold battery, you don't have the same experience as with a 25% state of charge battery, which is around 30 degrees. And now we put everything here to the test. I'll do all test drives in mode B because I already tested mode D, and mode D works as the same as mode B when it comes to normal or sport mode. So they are comparable. The only difference is in mode D, you will need the pedals on your steering wheel to get the stages of the recuperation. And in mode B, you can do it with the acceleration pedal. So let's hit the road and do some testing. First, let's check in drive mode B with the driving profile normal. And I'll do an acceleration and a deceleration so we can see what will happen. And as you can already see, when I accelerate up to 80 kilometers an hour, I got the complete power, the torque on the rear axle. Sometimes we have slight torque on the front axle, but basically I'm a rear wheel driver as of now. And the same applies when I just take off my foot from the acceleration pedal and we go into braking or regeneration. We have zero torque on the front axle and all the negative torque on the rear axle. So basically I'm only regenerating with the rear axle, and it's about 80 kilowatts of power I'm regenerating here right now, whilst on the front axle there is zero torque. I'm still in drive mode B, but I switched over the driving profile to sport. And now when I accelerate, you see that really changes everything. I have now a constant torque on the front and the rear axle, and you can also see the distribution of the power. And basically now it's a permanent all-wheel drive. And when I stop accelerating and just drive, you also see the quite even distribution of the power on both axles. So yes, now you're in permanent all-wheel drive. And when it comes to deceleration and regeneration, you can also see we we've got a constant torque on the front axle, minus 20 Newton meter. So basically, yes, we've got something going on the front axle. The only thing we now need to find out is whether it is mechanical braking or it is electrical regeneration, and therefore we need to dig into the data I've collected and have a quick analysis. I moved over to my home office because it's quite easier to look directly at the Excel sheet and at all the graphics I'm showing you right now than in my car. The first one you see here is the data I got from profile normal when driving. And basically on the horizontal axis you've got the speed, so you see the acceleration until the mid of the graphic, and the right part of the graphic is the deceleration. And on the vertical axis you've got the kilowatts, so the power and the torque. And let's dig into this graphic a bit. So first off, the orange or red line, this is the power consumption. And as you can see, as I accelerate, it goes up to nearly 80 kilowatts, around 60 kilometers an hour. And then when I start braking or just take off my foot from the acceleration pedal, you see the huge drop down to over 50 kilowatts where I regenerate energy. But more interesting are the blue lines. So the dark one is the rear torque, and you see it goes up, way up to 150 Newton meter, because if you accelerate a bit harsher, then it has to go up. And at the point where I am regenerating, it drops really low, way below 80 Newton meter. But the most interesting part is the light blue line. This is the front torque. And as you can see, even in mode normal, if you accelerate enough, you get front torque. So basically, this motor is working for you. But you can also see it stops working around 45 to 50 kilometers an hour because it's not needed anymore, and then it's a flat line until the end of this graphic. So basically it's an idle mode, there is no torque on the front axle. And this is special because when I regenerate, still no torque on the front axle, which basically means the front motor is not regenerating energy and there is no mechanical braking in normal profile. The whole deceleration comes from the rear axle and the regeneration of the rear motor. But now it's a whole different story when we look at profile mode Sport. And let's have a look at the power. You see I accelerated again really hard, so power goes up to 180 kilowatts, and when I start decelerating, you see again it drops to above 50 kilowatts, but not more. So basically I've got the same regeneration as with mode normal. But it really gets exciting when we look at the torque lines. And you see, I really took the full available torque of my car from the rear engine. We are up to 310, even a bit more Newton meter. And that's the maximum the pre-model year 2024 motor is able to put on the road, because the APP 310 basically means 310 Newton meters. The newer one gets up to 550, so different story again. And you also see the front motor goes way over 100 Newton meter to help the rear motor in accelerating. And as you can see, it never drops. Basically, it stays above 0 on the line. Yes, at 34 there is a small drop, but after that, in just driving with around 75 to 80 kilometers an hour, it stays at around 16 to 18 Newton meter. And then it gets really exciting when we look at the regeneration. And as soon as I put off my foot from the acceleration pedal, you see it's getting negative. We are basically nailed on that 20 Newton meter line, on that minus 20 Newton meter line for the front axle. And in the same time, the rear axle has a lower Newton meter, a lower negative torque. And basically, if you sum it up, you are back again to the same value as a normal mode, but now distributed on front and rear axle. And basically, this tells us there is definitely on the front axle some negative torque, so mechanical braking or regenerating. And if you want to really look into this, if it is regeneration, we need to dig into the numbers, and we are crunching on the numbers right now. Now let's dig into the numbers, and I show you some here. Those data is picked from all the data I collected during my driving tests, and I choose those 4 data points to analyze. And what you already might notice is that Normal 2 and Sport 2 were data not collected in this video, what you've seen before, but in another test drive where I did the same at 120 kilometers an hour, because this even makes it more clear what is happening and going on here. And Normal 1 and Sport 1 are actual data from this video. And if you look at the chart, first you have the power, the kilowatts of regenerated power. Then the next 2 ones is front torque and rear torque. Then we have the rounds per minute of our engine, and I only got that one value, as I already said. My car scanner is only able to read one value. I can't have more. Then you see the speed driven, and then we do a bit of math. And one thing here is really important, because we need a formula to calculate that. And that formula I'll show you here. It is P, which stands for power in kilowatts, equals M multiplied with N, whilst M is torque in Newton meter and N is rounds per minute, and this is divided by 9,550. And with this formula, which shows the power of a turning motion or of a rotational motion, which an e-motor is, we can calculate. And I'll do this here. First off, I sum the torque. And with the normal mode, the sum of the torque is the same as the rear torque, because front torque is 0. And with the sport mode, we see the calculated torque is of course higher than the rear one, because front gets added. And if I do the math with this formula, you see first row I've got minus 55.4 calculated versus 52.7 which was measured. Next row minus 83.9 versus minus 79. And then it gets interested when we head to the sport mode. We've got 50, which was measured, and 57.5 calculated, and we've got minus 75.8 versus 83.2. So basically the calculated amount of energy is higher. And it gets really interesting if I only do the calculation with the rear torque in sport mode. You see in calc rear. And when looking at the first one, I've got minus 45 versus minus 50, so not enough energy. And in the second row, it's more obvious. I've got minus 75.8 measured versus minus 65.1. So there's over 10 kilowatts missing. And if I look at this basically tells me as an amateur there must be some regeneration going on the front axle, because else I would not reach those values. For me, this is the proof that we've got regeneration on the front axle and not mechanical braking. But I'm an amateur. Write me in the comments if I'm completely wrong here. Maybe I've got the wrong formula. And I have to admit something else. Well, the car scanner and the OBD service port, which delivers the data to the car scanner, is not real time. So basically, those values are not perfect matches. It could be that at the moment where it is happening, rounds per minute are higher or lower, torque are higher and lower, or kilowatts are higher and lower than shown in my car scanner app. So basically, we have a bit of a deviation here. Second, the rounds per minute is only from one motor. I don't have the second motor. So basically, I guess it's the rear motor I am getting here. I don't have the rounds per minute of the front motor. And the rounds per minute of the front motor might differ from the rear one, because the front motor is on its own with its own gear. I don't know. And last but not least, you've got some losses. What we've calculated is the potential regenerated energy at the motors itself, not what gets into your battery. So basically, I'm pretty sure that this is the proof that we also have got regeneration on the front axle when you're driving in sports mode. When I look at all the data, all the analysis and the driving experience, I would say yes, you can drive the ENYAQ in a permanent all-wheel drive mode. You simply have to switch over to driving profile Sport. And I'm also quite profound to say, yes, your front motor is able to regenerate energy. But I did not study anything of this, so basically I might be wrong. So write me in the comments if I am wrong and we can discuss about that. But for me it is proven that the ENYAQ is able to regenerate on both axles and that you can drive with a permanent all-wheel drive mode. You just have to hit Sport.